Hello and welcome. It's Frances here, and with it being a long weekend here in Adelaide, I've been able to grab a few moments to do a couple of videos, especially in relation to a few things that I've been churning around in the back of my head. Just wanting to put some of these thoughts out there. And yeah, so basically clearing the mind. So I've written a few notes that hopefully will keep me on track. And the first is dealing with being a Southern Hemispheric pagan, I guess. And that comes about, or what inspired me to do this, rant, is that there's certain times of the year, and we've just gone through it with the full moon, that really annoys or disappoints. I don't know, I just go, really, people? So it highlights the fact that there is sort of a naivety with respect to the differences in the hemispheres. And a good example is this June moon, where I'm seeing on some Southern Hemispheric social media pages it being referred to as a strawberry moon. We're in the middle of winter. It's 10 degrees outside. There is nothing to do with strawberries. Strawberries are a summer fruit. So in the Northern Hemisphere, yes, it's strawberry moon. Here in winter, it's not strawberry moon. And it's not hard to even understand the differences in the hemispheres. However, there is, I don't know if it's laziness, naivety, people just not thinking anymore when they share memes and posts, and on the surface that might sound like I'm being a grumpy old witch, which I know I am, but there seems to be a lack of care, and I don't understand why people are not applying thought to what they're actually posting or sharing. There's sort of like an urgency to, oh, I found this information, I must share it, as opposed to actually looking at what you're sharing. How does it apply? Is it actually relevant? Should we actually do any research to see how relevant this information actually is? Especially when it comes from, or comes to, Northern Hemispheric posts and things like that. And being a writer, I suppose this is why I sort of start gritting my teeth and sitting on my hands and turning off the computer and walking away. I get it that in the Northern Hemisphere there's the larger population, and especially from a publishing point of view, the publishers are, I suppose by and large, are thinking about the bottom dollar. However, there's still quite a considerable population of people south of the equator who are pagans, who are witches, who are earth-centric spiritual path followers, who want their own information. Unfortunately, there isn't really a Southern Hemisphere counterpart to the big publishing houses that we see in the north. And as such, any of us authors who are fortunate enough to get contracts, we still have to sort of flavour our writing to appease the Northern Hemisphere reader first, and then the Southern Hemispheric reader. And so it was almost like, for those of us living south of the equator, we are deemed second-class citizens when we're not as valid or relevant. Our information is not as important. We see it in the books where they say, oh, if you live south of the equator, just turn things 6 months around. And it doesn't always work. As I discovered when I was writing my own book, self-published book, Dancing the Sacred Wheel, though I did stick to the traditional Sabbats and that, and change that to the Southern Hemisphere, it was very evident very quickly in the piece when I started writing the book that our seasons are different. And it's not just global warming, it's how the land, especially in Australia, how it's completely different. And with Australia being the size of America, the US, how the east coast and west coast are different, and then we have this whole dry area in the middle, and up north there's the tropics, and where I live down the south, it's pretty cold today. So the traditional wheel of the year doesn't always fit in. But that's took me 10 years to write that book, so it's probably another 10 years for the sequel, or a second book to come through like that. So I don't understand why we get treated like second-class citizens, why people, the novices, the newbies, aren't able to realise that posting something about a strawberry moon in the middle of winter is irrelevant. And there's lots of differences that I don't know. I'm just sort of like stumped at times. Is this sort of a flow-on effect from non-coven, non-teacher training, where everybody's eclectic and available to access whatever information that they can access, where books and authors of books can easily just clip together various pieces of information without doing their own search, and voila, they've got a book. It's so easy to be an author these days. Is that making me sounding too elitist? It probably is. I don't want to sort of like dampen anybody's parade, and I know I come from a more traditional background, but there is still the need to do the research. And at this day with social media, but with the internet, you don't need to go down to the libraries that you did in my day. It's not hard to actually do a little bit of research, sort of find sites in particular. So if we are living in Australia or New Zealand or Brazil or somewhere else, or South Africa, South Africa, somewhere south of the equator, to find your local sites that are relevant to you, and not always use a Northern Hemispheric base site. Yes, get some information. Yes, okay, they call it the strawberry moon. But hey, it's not hard to realise we're in the middle of winter, south of the equator. So what would you call the moon here? Are there local peoples? What would they call the moon? Do they actually observe the moon? Not all cultures did. Here in Australia, the different Aboriginal, they would call them countries, but the different Aboriginal peoples, depending on where they lived, had different names, different associations. Some of them only acknowledge 2 seasons, wet and dry, which is quite logical. Some of them acknowledge up to 6, even 8 seasons. Some of these seasons only lasted 2 weeks. Some of them lasted more. Should we be looking beyond what has come through to us from the 60s and 50s? And by that, a lot of even the modern paganism is based on Gerald Gardner or Ross Nichols. They're based in England. Should we go go beyond the Celtic Wheel of the Year that we have had imposed upon us for the last, what are we looking at now, 50, 60 years since Gardner, Ross Nichols, and much longer than that? Do we need to look at our own local Indigenous people? And I know it can be a little bit, I'm very hesitant adapting cultures that I'm not familiar with, especially the Aboriginal peoples. I think a lot of it comes down to showing respect. But there's no reason why you can't learn as to some of the symbolism and see how that reflects the land that you reside on and the phases of the moon. Because a lot of the teachings or the seasonal observances, especially here in Australia, the Aboriginal people took and still observe today, are based on their relationship to the land. The migration of animals or birds when they move from summer grounds to winter grounds, hunting. Maybe we need to do that. So instead of calling the moon in June, in the middle of winter, by the winter solstice, strawberry moon. Maybe it should be solstice moon, ice moon, rain moon, freezing moon, something like that. Just a few thoughts to put out there. Blessings.